Pilot Boys in the building. Welcome to the Pilot Boys podcast, where you'll get the real on all things sports, music, and pop culture. I'm Mecca Don here with my co-host V.
Mama mentality for life.
Today is May 21st, 2020. Thank you guys for tuning in. I know you could be anywhere in the world, but you're here with us. We are quarantined still and social distancing due to this coronavirus pandemic, but we're figuring out a way to bring you a show at all costs, and hopefully we can get out of this thing soon. On today's show, we will talk to Scottie Graham, Senior Associate Athletic Director at Arizona State University. We will also do some news and notes of popular sports, music, and pop culture stories from around the country, from a potential 112 versus Jagged Edge battle in Verzuz, The Last Dance, Notre Dame opening up, and so much more. Shout out to our Patreon subscribers. Remember now that our Patreon subscribers will get our episodes on Wednesdays a night early. These donations help keep our show going. If you want to help keep us on air, you can donate at www.patreon.com/Pilot Boys Podcast. And don't forget, grab some Pilot Boys wristbands at shop.pilotboys.com. Let's go.
Where the Pilot Boys at? Pilot Boys, we get on up. We gon' fly, boys, we getting up.
You are listening to the Pilot Boys podcast. We are here with a very special guest. Man, jack of all trades, a man with a very, very long resume. Now he is the Senior Associate Athletic Director at Arizona State University. Please welcome Scottie Graham to the show. Scottie, what's up, man?
Man, I appreciate it. Beyond honored. Much respect. I get a chance to be on the show and represent the Buckeyes, so that's always good. Anytime you get a chance to represent and say what's up to Buckeye Nation, you want to do that.
Absolutely. A good thing I can see you now. I don't know what happened, but now I can see you, so that's good. So
Appreciate you coming on, man.
Yeah, so we're good to go, man. So we're going to jump right into it, man, because there's a lot to cover. Your career, I mean, first of all, I mean, you've had multiple careers and been successful in all of them. And it's, and you're still going. And it's amazing for us to watch kind of from a distance, but then, a little bit up close as well as we've gotten to know you. But we're going to start back in the day, man. Looking at your history, obviously you played football at Ohio State. That's kind of our common link. But you're from New York, and so my first question to you is, how did you even end up at Ohio State from New York? There are not a ton of players that go to Ohio State from New York.
Not many, but a few. In fact, Pete Johnson went to my high school, who played for the Bengals.
Yep.
I think John Brockington. A couple other guys.
Curtis Samuel, I think, is from New York too.
Yeah. This is when 1987, when I was coming out of high school, donors could actually, or boosters could actually contact you. And this guy named Jerry Brownfield from Great Neck North, if you read Great Gatsby, Great Neck North is Little Egg, Big Egg. So Big Egg is Great Neck North. Right. He kept writing Coach Bruce and just said, hey, this is a guy you got to see. This guy you got to see. And I didn't know where I was. I had never been on a plane before in my life.
Yeah.
I mean, I was going to Maryland or Syracuse. I was thinking I'm taking somewhere I could drive to. I'm not necessarily flying. Where is Ohio?
Right. Right. So what turned you around, and what made you say, what is it that you saw that said, okay, this is where I need to be. I'm coming to Ohio State.
Well, I saw people who looked like me. I mean, that was unique to see a guy like Bill Miles, rest in peace. I had to pay homage to him. Billy Hill. It was just so many people who I could pattern myself after. I mean, I saw myself doing things successful after football. So it was just a great opportunity for me. And then secondly, the two best decisions I ever made was going to Ohio State. The Ohio State. When I played, we called it Ohio State. Joey started the Ohio State. Right. Although most people, I got to remind them, it's called the Ohio State University. That's why we say that.
Absolutely.
And then I met my wife there. She's from Cleveland, and I got a chance to see what family represented. So, I mean, those are two best decisions I made in my life, obviously going to the Ohio State University and then get a chance to meet this beautiful woman who I've been married to for 30 years.
Yeah. One other question on your time at Ohio State is, obviously, no matter when you played at Ohio State, you played with great players. Talk to us about some of the great players that were there at the time that you were there, some of the guys that you played, and maybe any memorable moments that you had when you were at Ohio State.
It's just too many. But the thing about Ohio State, when people don't understand it until they get a chance to live it, you had to be political. You had to be intelligent. You had to be witty. you had to be smart, and you better be able to play, and you better be tough.
Yeah.
We had 3 other dudes who looked like you. We
Right.
had 14 running backs my freshman year.
Wow.
I mean, from Carlos Snow. Carlos Snow was number 1 recruit in the country. Emmitt Smith was the number 1 recruit. Carlos was number 2. Jeff Graham, who played in the NFL. Vinnie Clark was the first-round draft pick. Kurt Herbstreit on College Game Day. Joey Galloway. Steve Tovar. You could just keep naming the guys.
Wow.
And, yeah, I mean, it's really – I didn't understand Ohio State was Ohio State until I played in the NFL, and I came back to a game. Because as you know, when you're in those games, you don't really know those people there. Because we never were taught to pay attention to the fans because they can't do anything to you.
Right.
Pay attention to them dudes in the other shirt. And that's what we did. So when I came back, we played Notre Dame, I think, when I was playing for the Vikings, and Terry Glenn was on the team, and I think Eddie was on the team then too. And I was just like, this is unbelievable.
Right.
And I asked my wife, I said, is this many people actually here? And she goes, you never noticed them? I said, no. I mean, I didn't know the people outside. I mean,
Right.
we came there, it was halfway filled. So that experience was beyond. And again, we could talk for days just about understanding being political, being smart, being intelligent, being humble.
Right.
Have some humility. Throw a helmet in practice at Ohio State. Throw one
Right.
time. You might not see you no more.
Right. That's so
That's
true.
the reality of it.
And you mentioned the pros too, and let's talk a little bit about that too, because obviously, you played in the NFL for multiple years. I think three different teams, and so that experience must have been obviously different from college. Talk to us a little bit about that experience and some of the differences between that and what you learned throughout that process versus being in college.
Again, I mean, it's just the truth. I mean, but playing at Ohio State, you really were playing against the best. I mean, we got guys literally that playing in the pros can't play at Ohio State right now. They just can't. And it's the reality of it. I'm just being real. And when you ask Ohio State players, when you go to training camp, how many guys were there that couldn't play at Ohio State? And they said 5 or 6 of them. They couldn't play there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a different place. It's just different. And until you experience it, you can never understand it. So going to the pros for me, in fact, I had to come back and condition myself. I was getting out of shape in the pros because we had some of the best strength and conditioning coaches in the country. I mean, you think about it. I mean, in 1987, we had a field house. People were trying to get field houses now. And I'm thinking, at the time, I thought it was normal. I'm like, okay, this is what it's supposed to be. But then you look at other colleges and you're like, they don't have a field house? They practice in the heat still? Whoa, I mean, it just, to me, that experience being there helped me with the pros because I knew how to push myself over the edge. Because every damn practice I was pushing myself over the edge. And the competition really was with yourself. Yeah. And one of the things that I could tell you that Bobby Turner, who's the running back coach and probably the best running back coach in the world, said to us, all of us, I got 14 egos and I got 1 ball. Whoever controls the ego gonna get the ball. Most people don't understand that. You control your ego enough to get the ball. And a lot of guys can't control their ego. And that's just the reality of it. And just your footwork and everything we did. And you think about Raymond Harris, almost every running back I played with played in the pros. Raymond Harris, Carlos, Robert Smith, Paula Binote, Jeff Cothran. They all played. Raymond Harris. I mean, Raymond was a backup. You think about that for a minute.
Right. Yeah. Raymond was a stud. That's crazy.
So we hear that
really cool.
We hear that consistently across generations that the training that they received at Ohio State was actually way more rigorous than anything that they saw when they got to the next level.
But just a mind state, though. I mean, the presentations you get, you just sit back and go, again, you think it's normal because you don't know anything else. Just the fact that I have an advanced degree. Remember, you got an advanced degree. That's what we do. I mean, that's the expectations. So I sit back and I go, thank God I made that decision. I mean, undergrad is an expectation. Law school is what you did. I mean, so for me, getting my master's degree, it was like, this is before guys are graduating early. My 5th year in college, I was in grad school.
Yeah, talk about that too, because first of all, you have your master's in was African Studies. It was called Black Studies back then, probably, right? And then they changed it. What made you decide that to kind of pursue that, to pursue a master's first of all in general, and then to pursue that specific master's as well?
Well, one thing you learned at Ohio State right away, and I know people are gonna get tired of this here in Ohio State, but time's not on your side. You think you got time. Nah, time's not your friend. I mean, you think you start counting that time, you're probably not going to be playing at our school. So for me, I didn't want to waste my time. And so first thing I did was I went to school right away. I thought I was going to be an education major. I thought I was going to be a teacher. I was going back to my high school to be the football coach. And that's what I wanted to do. And once I went to grad school, I had a whole different global thought of life. And it was like, I don't know what I want to do. And then I started doing internships, and that's another thing. You were pushed to do internships. I did an internship at the National Football League Players Association. Wrote Gene Upshaw a letter. We didn't have emails at the time. So I sent Gene a letter just saying, I would love to do an internship. He said, all right, no problem. I sent him my resume. I did an internship with. I did an internship at Anheuser-Busch. I did an internship with Frank Cass down at Continental. I was curious. And I guess that's the one thing that I did get, and I wish other people did. Your curiosity is something that was influenced. It wasn't beat down to go, why are you curious about that? I mean, the reason you have a law degree is because you was curious about it.
Right. And it's crazy because, I think one of the most powerful things that we have as, former athletes and, former people who've, been exposed to a lot of different things is to kind of talk to the next generation, right? So before we get into some of your more professional stuff after football, I want to ask you this question because you just touched on it a little bit. If you were to give advice to kind of a young guy right now who's in college, who's pursuing his degree or, obviously wants to go to the pros, what things would you tell them to make sure they focused on before they graduated?
The one thing is to be yourself. I mean, you can't hide. At the end of the day, you better be yourself and be the best version of you. Other than that, work on your strengths. And your weaknesses won't show. But people tell you, work on your weaknesses. I'm like, good luck with that. Keep working on your weaknesses. I'm going to keep working on my strengths.
Right.
You don't have enough time to catch me. So work on your strength. You're gifted. You're amazing. You're good enough. And consistently work on yourself. People always look out externally. And that's another thing too, Ohio State. You better understand your role. When you walk into a DB room, a wide receiver room, are you the alpha in the room? Or are you going to be the alpha? Understand there is a pecking order. And those who are patient, what I talked about, it becomes you. My redshirt freshman year, I had no thoughts in my mind I was going to be starting. I didn't play a lot. I was pissed off. But patience. All right, you can see your time coming. And so also too, it's a process. I tell young people all the time, everything's not going to happen overnight. And unfortunately, they grew up in a generation. It's like apps. They switch over to the next app. Well, your life is not an app. Your life's going to take time. In the process, anything that's good is going to take some time. I mean, the Bible describes it as a pomegranate. Beautiful thing is a pomegranate. Most people don't buy that pomegranate because it's expensive and the fruit is hard to get to.
Right.
So they just skip right over it. I'm eating something that's going to be easy to eat and it's going to be quick. But the best thing is that even like when you're cooking, if you cook it longer, marinate it longer, it's going to be better. So,
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Did I answer your question?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
No, that's a very good answer. A great answer, actually.
Yeah.
And now, like, getting back to kind of the timeline, you had a 6-year career in the league, which is a good long career, right? I think the average is about 4.
And 3 for a running back, maybe 2
3
and a half.
for a running back. So you did have a good career. And we often talk to people and former athletes, especially people who've played at that level at Ohio State and the NFL, the transition time when that's taken away from you, when football's taken away from you, is difficult for a lot of guys, right? Take us into that time in your life, what you were going through, the reality that it was over, and adjusting to what am I going to do now?
Well, it wasn't a transition. It was a seamless process. Again, unfortunately, in training, you're taught to paint with details. Like John Gordon's book, The Carpenter. You don't have a Wagner power paint in your life. You paint details. So the details of my life started with doing internships, being curious. What do I want to do? So everybody's going to transition. My transition came in 2011 when Gene Upshaw died. I worked for the NFLPA. I've been at 13 years and Gene died. And I was like, okay, here's your transition. What do you do? Okay, what are you good at? What are you successful at? Who do you know? Start building relationships. Go back to the drawing board. Just go back to what you know and go with that same recipe because it's always going to work. And the people that know you, it's the reason I'm on the show right now. If I didn't have a paradigm of success, Mecca wouldn't have me on the show because he doesn't want the show to be portrayed that way. And another thing I would tell the young people, what you do between 18 and 21 will affect your 45 and 50. I'll say it again. They don't think in their mind 18 is going to affect your 45. Your 18 is going to affect your 50. Well, I'm 51. When I was 18, you probably would 1, Mecca. But my 18 to 24 to now to my 50 says, you know what? I'm having Scottie on my show. I'm going to have him on my show. And if I had done something silly to Ohio State, you couldn't have me on here. And that's just the reality of it. And some of the stuff you do right now is because of the internet. It's never going away. Just call Google.
Right. Right. That's definitely real. And then you eventually ended up, go ahead, V.
Yeah, you ended up at the NFLPA. Take us into how you said you had an internship, how you initially got into the NFLPA, and a little bit about your early time there, transitioning from the player side to now being part of the union and being responsible for the well-being of the players that currently were playing?
Yeah, it was good. It's a good question, and I'll take it quickly as I can and efficiently as I can. At the end of the day, I came in and Gene Upshaw saw one thing: I was a leader. I was comfortable being myself, and I had a language that I could speak to the younger people that sounded like him, but it educated them. So you needed to go in the locker room and talk to Tom Brady, but then you had to talk to somebody who didn't even go to college for 2 years, maybe 3 years. So being able to speak a different language and have that dexterity is something that, again, you taught at Ohio State. You can't walk up to a donor and go, "Hey, what's up? My name's Scottie." No. "How you doing? Nice to meet you, Scottie Grant. What are you majoring in?" So just being able to have that dexterity and understand the crowd and who you're talking to and be able to use the different languages is something that's a skill that is honed. And Gene saw that, and he was like, "I could take this guy with me on the road. He can go into a meeting with 53 guys from different economic backgrounds, different racial backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds, and he could tell them the same story and they'll all understand it." So at that point, Gene just started, he kept feeding me. And the more I learned, and he would give me assignments to do, go out and do this, go out and do that. And that's how I grew. I mean, just being myself at the end of the day, and then building relationships.
Yeah.
With players. I mean, and again, you can't fool players.
No.
You can't. I mean, they know.
Right.
They know. When you guys know, when you go to the basketball court, just the guy got the coolest shoes will mean the best player. And you could tell by the first dribble if this dude could play or not. So when you walk into a locker room, they know if you care or not. So to me, I came in as a former player. I don't really know y'all. I want to know you and I care about you. And then thirdly, I want to serve you. How could I help you?
Right. So talk a little bit about that too. Talk about what were some of your kind of professional roles while you were there? Because like you said, you were there for 13 years. So I'm sure your roles kind of grew and expanded throughout the time that you were there.
Well, I was regional director when I first got there. And that was basically, I had teams that I would go to. I visited all 32 teams, and we were charged of disseminating information on the collective bargaining agreement. In fact, they just signed a new deal. And your job was to make sure that it's a small sample. So we had to teach in vignettes back then. And I say 91, through 2000. Wasn't a lot of technology. We got Blackberries probably around 2011, 2013. So the communication wasn't like it is now. So you actually had to go in and have slides. Eventually, we got the PowerPoints. We had overheads. And you had to explain the slice of the pie, why the owners were getting 50% of the money. But you're teaching a group of people who don't really get it until they leave. So that's hard because they come from college. They're being trained the best places in the world. Then they go to the NFL. And by the time you get there, they don't really understand. Like, what do you do? Who are you, the union? You have 3 meetings a year. And that's a quarter of their life if it's 3 years. And then in that 45-minute meeting, because the attention span is small, you better give them something they can understand. And for my whole goal was, if you get in trouble, call us. If you get hurt, you call us. If your feelings are hurt, you call us. We want to be a resource to you. And that's ultimately how you build that. I built that credibility up. And then when Gene died, DeMar Smith came in. He goes, "I'm putting you on the marketing side." And I'm like, "I don't want to go to the marketing side." He goes, "I want you to go to the marketing side." I'm like, "No, I don't want to go." In my mind, I didn't say that to him. It's the guy who runs the place. He goes, "Nah, you got a lot of relationships for money." And I'm like, "What's he talking about?" And I remember calling Warren Moon and go, "Warren, man, I don't know about this transition." He said, "What do you mean?" He said, "They moved me over to the marketing side. What do I do?" And he said, "Just be Scottie and do the job." And I was like, "Okay." So, but as you know, dealing with money and conversations and money, it changes your relationship. Now, he was a guy that was talking about labor, working conditions, rights, when you go to practice. Now I'm talking about, "Hey, man, can you do this commercial for this amount of money?" That's a different conversation when you're talking about some money. So I was just authentic in everything I did. Like, "Listen, this trade card company wants to pay you this amount of money. Do you want to do it or you don't?" And then also, too, I knew to tell the trade card company, he's not going to do it for that amount of money. So give me the money that I need. Let me go get this done. So building up that credibility and that trust to be able to get things done was the key.
Yeah. And you mentioned the collective bargaining agreement, too. And, obviously that's something that changes, every decade, basically. But talk to us a little bit about that, too, because, you hear a lot. Actually, there's two-part question. One is, speaking specifically on DeMaurice, who I've had a chance to meet. I like the guy. But you hear a lot of people criticize him a lot in terms of, maybe things that he gets done or acquiescing. But then also just the union itself in terms of people say it's the weakest union, baseball and basketball get things way, way better, no guaranteed contracts, all that type of stuff. What are your perspectives kind of on, first of all, whether or not any of that stuff is even true? And if it is, why it kind of developed that way?
Well, you have to know history, and history going to tell us all the truth. Baseball, by leaps, bounds, and moons and stars, has been, remember, they all got to go to minor league. They understand what labor is. And I explained to you a minute ago, our players have 3 years. And by the time they understand, they had a major injury or they've been fined for something. Then they understand what the union does. But as a baseball player, Michael Jordan, Derek Jeter played for the Columbus Clippers. So you have to ride a bus. For our college football players, I mean, they have not necessarily been coddled, but the system they play underneath doesn't affect their labor because they're not in a labor agreement except that they have to stay in college for 3 years. So they don't think about it that way. They think about it as the pros. When you go into the pros, when baseball players look at it, is it labor right away? Labor. And so that makes it difficult. So I would never argue about that. I would argue that baseball always had the best because Joe Torre was a player rep. Reggie Jackson, player rep. And then on that, I could really stick our chest out about, meaning working for the NFLPA, we always took care of former players. And in 1992, when I got into the league, we didn't have a collective bargaining agreement. We just had papers. They were handing papers across the desk. There was nothing bound. We finally got the agreement in 93. We decided to give some of the salary cap back to former players because the guys that went on strike, who are soldiers, they were forgotten about. And Gene always said, let's give back to our former players. And this year, I got my hit, which is like, wow. And you hope you live long enough to go, can you increase my pension? So 6 years I have are like 9 years in the system now. And I'm 52, I'll be 52 in March. But I mean, in 36 months, I could take that. That's a nice little slice. I mean, I think the players. So we had a habit of always giving back. And that's how you become equal with everybody. So no matter how many years Randy Moss played Hall of Famer, my pension's the same as his. We've always said the Lions should get the share of the resources. And of course, Randy Moss deserves it, quarterbacks do. Because as long as they ride, we're gonna ride. And then you got a hard job, man. You think about it, populations of people that are 4 different decades that are living. Right. And you gotta satisfy them all.
Yeah. One of the things that's often mentioned is that it's much more difficult for players in the NFL to kind of take a hardline stance, right? Because one, disparity in salaries, paid over 16 weeks, that financial pressure to cross the line comes sooner. Do you think that that's a reality, or do you think that that's just kind of like something that's put out there as kind of an excuse?
I think it's all a reality. I mean, some players, that's what makes it tough because it fits different boxes. You got some players who spend all their money. That's just the reality of it. You got some players who save, but you don't have a group of people who are being financially responsible, which is a whole nother conversation. I mean, if you think about it, just do the math yourself. Just put $2 million down. Average that over 17 weeks. Make it last 52 weeks. Again, $2 million. Just do the exercise. 17 weeks, divide that up. Now make it last 52.
Right. Plus taxes, plus agent fees, plus
slice that in half. I mean, so, and my rookie season, I knew right away. I was married. My wife was like, "Here's the deal: we don't make a lot of money." And I'm like, "Oh, we're rich. I'm making $105,000." She's like, "No, we're not." Yeah. We're gonna save this. We're gonna have one car, and I'm gonna take you to work. I'm gonna pick you up. And I'm like, that was the best decision I ever made. Just trusting and listening to her. Yeah. I mean, because it was just. I mean, I remember at the end of the season, it was like, "No more money." Like, no, you don't get paid till next season. But it's January. Yeah, you don't get paid in September. And then it's not full money because you're not playing regular season. You're getting preseason money. That's $800 a week. Yeah. What? That's a tough lesson to learn.
Yeah. And a lot of the guys, we have friends obviously who didn't learn it. It took them 3, 4, 5 years. Sometimes they never learned it, because when you are making, exorbitant amounts of money, I think at some level you can start thinking that can happen very easily, but you realize very quickly that can't. We were having a conversation, V and I, with a current NFL player the other day, and we told him, we said, look, if you had to go make $1,000 right now, and it had nothing to do with football, how would you do it? And he was like, I don't know. So I was like, yeah. So you understand that $1,000 that you just throwing away on some random pair of shoes or whatever. Understand, like it's hard in the real world to make that money. But one of the things that you touched on too, with regard to kind of the players and the contracts, is the non-guaranteed contract in that aspect. And you hear that a lot as one of the biggest gripes that obviously players have, and even fans who look at the NFL and they say, it's not fair that these guys have to play for non-guaranteed contracts. What's your perspective on that?
I think the signing bonus is the biggest difference. If you look at the average salary, we fighting right in the top of them. I think if you look at like some of the baseball players who are making 35, 40 million, we got guys making that money now a year. Right. the signing bonus is coming straight to you. I mean, it's literally coming straight to you. And those contracts, I mean, Bobby Bonilla got a guarantee. You still got to play. I mean, it ain't like baseball going to pay you and you're not playing.
Right.
You know, or basketball, you got to still play.
But when you hear like a guy he got a $70 million contract, but then you find out that only $32 million of it is guaranteed. Yeah.
But you know the crazy part about it? You can get a guaranteed contract in the NFL. There's no rule that says you can't do that in a collective bargaining agreement. You can get one. That's what everybody. Well, we can't get guaranteed. Yes, you can negotiate one. There are some players with guaranteed contracts, and it's not my job to tell you who they are. There are players in the NFL who have leverage. Who have leverage to get guaranteed contracts. Yeah. Trust me, there are players that have guaranteed contracts.
Yeah. So I guess
not telling anybody.
Right. So I guess it is a kind of a leverage issue too, as well. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's for us, it's frustrating just because we've seen like, you know, like for example, we had a friend that signed like a 4-year, $17 million contract. He got $8 million. $8 million was guaranteed, or maybe $6 million was guaranteed, and then after the second year, he got hurt and they cut him, and then he was never able to kind of find his way back.
And the thing is, sometimes guys don't know he was told that $10 million of that contract was guaranteed by his representation at the time. So when the reality hit and he was cut, that wasn't what it was. You know, those were some uniquely challenging times, and that's the unique thing about the NFL, right? Your likelihood of getting injured or having a career-ending injury is much higher. So that's why I think a lot of people are concerned about the term non-guaranteed contracts. Like, look, the NFL makes more money than any of the other leagues. You can make sure the contracts are guaranteed once they sign them against injury or other things like that to ensure that these guys are a little bit more protected for the difference in risk they're taking versus other sports.
I have it on the other side of that coin. I'll give you a 10-year, $5 million contract, guaranteed. You take it?
Me personally?
Yeah.
It depends on what my value is at the time. But
no, you take it. That's my point. Your value going to change. Yeah. So why would you guarantee something that you can go back and negotiate again?
That's they mentioned that about Scottie Pippen, right? And he wanted to guarantee his future. Not thinking that his value would increase in a couple of years, and
but that's kind of the bet that you take, right? The risk that you take.
Yeah.
I mean, this is
you turn into a star. You turn into a star. The game changes for you. But if right now your rookie season, they say we'll give you $5 million for 10 years. You think I'll take it, and now you lead the league in rushing for the last 5 years. Like, man,
right? Yeah.
On the other side too, some guys get paid and don't play. Like they got all that money and they're not even starting anymore on their teams.
That's true.
So you got to look at it, and again, you got to go back to business though. Right. That's why I hit you with the business one. You like, well, depends what my value is.
Right.
Like, automatically, most guys go, I'll take the $5 million. Okay.
Right.
But with the salary cap, remember now, the salary cap, you gave me a guaranteed contract in 1991. You know what the salary cap number was for 53 guys, and we had 28 teams. The salary cap was $36.3 million.
Oh wow!
And it was 28 teams. 28 teams. Yeah. Now there's 32 teams, so that's 500 more jobs because they have practice squad guys now. The salary cap's over 170 million. So if they guaranteed your contract last deal, you would take it, but you'd be pissed, and now you're holding out. Like, why is you holding out? Because you signed a bad deal, and now you're trying to get out of it.
Right.
What do you think about salary caps generally? That's another conversation. That's an interesting topic on whether
it controls the business. It controls the business. I mean, that's ultimately it. And the revenue sharing model is something they have to do. We couldn't survive if they didn't do that. If we didn't make them share, it's called the trust. I mean, that's one of the things that Gene and Paul Tagliabue fought. And thank God they got that done. That I believe in perpetuity, they're always going to share money because you got 32 millionaires who don't necessarily like each other. They're under the same brand as the NFL, and they all get equal shares, but they're all not making the same. They're all not valued. I mean, there wasn't 5 franchises that were half. When I played for the Vikings, Roger Hedrick sold the Vikings for $275 million. Red McCone sold it for $500 million. It's worth like $1.6 billion now, the team, without the stadium. Right. So, I mean, the Cowboys like $2 billion. So the value of the franchise is going up. And as long as we grow with the salary cap and the salary cap grows with the ownership, then I have no problem with it.
Yeah, because
we actually invest in that. You know that? The players actually help the players build those stadiums.
Yeah. Yeah, and the only thing that I wonder is, like, for example, the NBA, you have bird rights to certain players, right? Like what we see often happen in the NFL is a team wins with, let's say, their quarterback on a rookie contract. Then what happens is you pay the quarterback and you can't pay the rest of the team. Like the Seahawks are the best example, right? They had to dump money on Russell Wilson, but then what they worked to build through the draft and through scouting had to kind of be broken up because of salary cap restrictions. Do you think that could work, a model in which there's kind of bird rights on your players on your roster to retain them?
I think just again, it's the NFL. They're some of the most innovative people in the world. They can make anything work out. And again, you just gotta know the leverage you have. If you're Ezekiel Elliott, you got pretty good leverage. I mean, if you are Dak Prescott, you got pretty much leverage. Are you going to fold or you going to hold them? And that's the risk you take. I mean, Melvin Gordon took a huge risk, and you just got to decide. It worked out for him, but didn't work out like it could have.
Right. And what do you think about Roger Goodell? What's your opinion on him as a commissioner? Because you've obviously been there through Tagliabue and now Goodell.
I could take it from Gene Upshaw, one of the best negotiators in the world. I mean, his job was to get the TV rights. That was his job before he became the commissioner, and he was able to go to CBS, NBC, Fox, because Fox was new. I don't know if you know that. Fox came in like in '93. And said, "Pay me," and this is what we're worth. And that's ultimately his game plan. Obviously, he's a great leader. He does exactly what the owners want him to do because, he does what they want him to do because he wouldn't be there. I mean, you have 32 billionaires. They're not going to have somebody negotiate for them. They're not going to be in a strong position.
Right.
And, he does his job. I don't have a personal opinion against him. I do know him. If you saw me, you say, "Scottie, what's up?" But it's a job he has to do. You can't take that personal.
Right.
Yeah. He's not there for his public relations. So.
No, he's there to make that cash. One other question too, before we move on to Arizona State, is that we had the community relations manager for the NFL on our show a couple of weeks back, Christina Hovestad, and one of the questions that we asked her was, what does she think is the NFL's kind of responsibility in social justice, right? And obviously it's a corporation that responsible for putting the product of football on the field. But, you also have a constituency in terms of fans and players who care a lot about social justice issues, not just Colin Kaepernick. What are your thoughts on that in terms of what the NFL's kind of responsibility is when it comes to social justice?
I could never actually measure the amount of anything in a cup, but they do a great job with breast cancer. Obviously, the fines, I don't know if you know, the fines go to Nick Barter County. And when you get a player gets fined for socks or something, that money goes to 3 different charities. You can't tell an independent business. You wouldn't go to Target and go, that's the difference. People look at the NFL like it's a holy grail. The NFL. Well, people don't go to Target and say the same thing. People don't go to Walmart and say the same thing. I mean, that's just the reality of it. So I can't never judge another man how they run their business. I can never do that. I never will. I think we need it from everybody. I just can't put all that weight on the NFL and sport, even though sport has a huge example, obviously, from Nelson Mandela. I mean, what rugby did for that country is unbelievable. So we have a responsibility in sports to pull people together. But I mean, as far as I think they do a lot in social, what they're doing. I think they have done a lot. They've had some roundtables, but again, there's different personalities in the whole thing. So once you got personalities and people have agendas, you don't know what's going to happen. So I don't really want to add a lot of weight to that space. I just think they do a lot. I mean, they do a lot. Breast cancer they do. What I love is the mental state when they do that. That to me, because a lot of us don't ever really talk about our mental because we're strong, football, mental. The mental gym is affecting a lot of people right now, and they don't even know it. Right,
absolutely. So let's talk about Arizona State, man, because you're a senior associate athletic director at Arizona State. Arizona State is all the way across the country, right? From where you grew up, and then obviously where you played football, and then also being in DC. First of all, let's talk about the transition, kind of just to the state, right? And then also, what was it that drew you to that program?
It's about relationships, as we said. Ray Anderson and I had an intimate relationship. He was second, third in charge of the NFL, and before that, he was with the Falcons. Before that, he represented Danny Green, Tony Dungy, Brian Billick, Tyrone Willingham. These were all my coaches on the Vikings. Wow. So I've always known him. And I always looked at it, I said, man, this is like, I want to get to know this guy, get the chance to know him. So every year at the Pro Bowl, I would always chit-chat with him at the gym because I love working out. He works out. And I said, well, if you get an opportunity, I'd love to work for you. But I didn't want to work for management. I didn't. It would be hard for me to work for a club. It'd be really hard. I just, I could figure it out, but it'd be hard because I know what they think and how they think and how they operate. And he 2014, you still want to work with me? I said, yep. He says, all right, don't tell anybody. I'm going to Arizona State. I'll bring you in. I said, what? Okay. So now I'm like going to work on Monday, going, I'm nervous. He says he's going to hire me. What's going to happen? Did I get my letter? How do you do that? Now I'm thinking this is my first time ever really transitioning because Gene hired me from the internship. So it was like, all right, what do you do? Cover letter? What do I do here? And I'm like, who do I tell? Got to tell somebody. I told my wife. And I'm like, she's like, all right, I can't tell anybody. My daughter's going to go to college. So I'm like, you know what? I got to tell her, but I can't tell her. Just, So, in those situations, when you're in high level like that, you really, you want to keep that thing shut as much as you can.
Yeah, for sure.
And in June, he brought me on. I went in and resigned. I mean, it was just something new, and it was exciting. I never really understood what the AD did before, even though I didn't really see Bill Miles as an AD. I saw him as an extension of football.
Yeah.
And so I didn't really look at it like I didn't even know what AD was when I was there. I think that what was the guy's name that my freshman year he quit. That's when I first learned what integrity was. Rick Bay, that's his name. And I'm glad I remembered his name. Rick Bay, my freshman year, 1987, he was told to fire Earl Bruce. He said, I'm not firing Earl Bruce. And that's what I learned. I never knew what integrity really meant. I mean, integrity, do what you say, everybody uses the word integrity.
Mm-hmm.
Rick Bay said, I am not firing Earl Bruce. I quit. He quit. I couldn't believe that. And after that, I don't even know who the EAD was because I never was really in trouble at Ohio State, so I didn't go visit him for that. And then I had no needs to go to talk to any ADs. I went to my Larry Romanoff and Kate Riffey and them, did my study, went to lift and play football, went to school. I didn't really understand what they did. And so when I became AD, it was like, all right, who do I pattern myself after? Went back to Warren Moon again. Be yourself. Make sure the people know that you're going to help them, you're going to listen to them, and you're going to guide them the best way you can. So I just went on a fact-finding mission to figure it out. And through the process, we hired 17 new coaches. We've moved up to Director Cup every year. We're in the top 30 right now, best programs in the country. We've added hockey, we've added triathlon, we've added lacrosse. So we're adding sports and people are dropping sports. We're probably one of the most innovative universities in the country. During this COVID operation that we're going through right now, our online platform is world renowned. So it really didn't skip. It hurt everybody, but it didn't hurt us because our student athletes and our students could take online classes. And so people talk about our Arizona State being this party school, but this party school is pretty innovative. And just the fact that, people, it's hot. So it looks like you're having a lot more fun, I guess. There was plenty of parties at Ohio State.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's the transition. And it's been 7 years now. I'm going on my 7th season. It's been a blast. And my daughter graduated and my son graduated from Arizona State. So they both have degrees. And they both have, really cool jobs too. And in fact, both my kids work for unions.
Wow. Well, not to go off topic for a second, but you've mentioned him twice now. Warren Moon, who I've gotten a chance to read a bit about. It's obviously an amazing football player, right? But also what he's done with his career after football as a businessman has been amazing. Why is he someone you always go to in these scenarios, and what do you think makes him so special as a mentor and as a entrepreneur and businessman?
Well, you want to be a lifelong learner. In Swahili, they call it funzi, wanafunzi, so learn, lifelong learner. And you're going to seek, when you get hurt or you need an answer for something, you're going to scream, whether it's your God, your wife, your mom, you're going to look for somebody that's going to give you an answer. And I remember when I played for the Vikings, me and Warren used to talk, and I asked him about, like, one day I said, my son asked me was I his friend. He was like, tell me he was best friend, but you was dad first. Because, I didn't grow up with a father, so I never really got those lessons. And one, if I'm 52, one got to be about 70. Because
looks about 40.
No, listen, he is long ball right now. I guarantee you better than half the guys in the NFL right now. And to me, you got to realize, me being me, I used to hang around Warren. And I'm like, I get that. I watched him. Then I played with him. I mean, I'm looking at a huddle, man. That's Warren Moon right there saying 60, 70 outside check with me. And I'm looking at him going, I'm trying not to be a fan, but I'm like, that's Warren Moon.
That's crazy.
He can give me the ball. I mean, you talking about, and then leadership, man, you talking about just, man, when he spoke in the huddle, he meant it. And it was unbelievable to me. I mean, I played with like 9 Hall of Famers. And he probably is, man, right up there with, Chris Carter the same way. But I seek information from Chris Carter too. And again, when you set that pedigree right, I'm shocked when I call people to pick up the phone. I'm like, this dude just picked up the phone again. And I've been knowing these guys for almost 30 years now.
Yeah.
So, being able to build that rapport with people that you trust and seek advice, because I mean, here's one, the ultimate star. You know what I mean? But he doesn't even act like it. I mean, we'd be at places eating dinner, and people say, could I sign that? And I'm like, we can raise slice to our steaks. And he's like, hold up, no problem. He'll sign it. And then he'll tell us, wait till I'm done eating. But he would sign. I'm like, so who am I not to be able to do something as humble as say hi to somebody? He's a guy that's in the Hall of Fame, and he will literally stop and take a picture with people. I'm like, wow. Then he also told me, too, don't hug people. Don't let them hug you. Stand there with your hands in front. This is before you could crop pictures. He's taught me that, too. Keep your hands here. Because especially little kids, so it was like little things like that, you don't really get the lessons. And, like Gene also told me, don't hang out in bars.
Yeah.
Go back to your room. Don't hang out in bars. I mean, just little lessons you give. If you're open to learning them, people constantly give them to you every day. So, that's Ox. I mean, Warren's a guy that I'll call today. I mean, Warren, you know, man, Scottie, what's up, man? I'm going to be in Arizona for 2 days, man. Let's, catch up. I'm like, all right, cool. And so when a guy like that comes to town, you stop everything and you go see him and look at him.
It's interesting too, because part of sports, what makes sports great, I think, is especially for people who played, and even at any level, really, even in high school, is the camaraderie, right? And then also just the relationships that you develop in some of these and then also the network, right? The reason why you and I were able to connect years later, we didn't go to school at the same time, we didn't know each other, was because of kind of the network and the brotherhood, And one of the things that I was proud about moving back to Arizona State a little bit is when you moved to Arizona State, I was like, here goes Scottie again, expanding the network. You know what I mean? Now he's taking it coast to coast. He literally coast to coast, and then having influence there. And when I see certain things happen, I'm like, I know Scottie was involved with that somehow behind the scenes, So it's also influence. And when you're talking about being in the athletic program, you also realize how many different things that you can how many different lives you can affect and change. And now one of the questions I want to ask about specifically was Herm Edwards, because obviously that was a huge hire, one of the biggest hires in sports history, really, at least college football history. And that seems to have made a tremendous splash, not just because he's a great coach, but a good person. Talk to us a little bit about that.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean, you know people, and when you read people's resumes, that's the picture of themselves they see of themselves. That's not what you see. The true resume is the resume when people read it, they go, oh, that's him. That's who that is. Just walk through the door. Herm is beyond that. I mean, anything you thought was, I mean, you're just like Warren. I mean, the door is wide open. Walk in anytime you want to. Coach, what's up? Oh, good. I'm good. I mean, unbelievable. And the great ones are always like that. They're available. I mean, Ray Anderson's the same way. The door is always open, 24/7.
Yeah.
Open the door. Just come in. I mean, and that's the policy, and that's the culture that you want. And it starts with culture. You want an open door. People will come to you. You don't want layers. You don't have kings and queens and monarchs. And man, we all working this thing together. We need levels for answers and questions and structure. But most part about it, if you need help, let's go get some help. But Herm is, how much time you got? I could tell you from there's a first, second, and third bus like the pros. First, second, third bus like the pros. Missing bus. You're getting left. You're not playing at that. It's almost unbelievable. I'm thinking, yeah, this is going to work. And my mind is like, I'm with it. It was going to work. We got a first, second, third bus. So the guys that want to be there early, get there early. Guys are the medium guys, and the guys don't want to be there early and sit in the locker room, look at each other, take the third bus. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's great to hear you talk about it too, because we see what we know about Herm basically from what we see on TV and different vignettes and basically that type of stuff. But it seems like everybody that you talk to, has kind of the same.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
You walk in there right. I brought Warren down there when he came into town, and they know each other. They're contemporaries, man. I'm just sitting listening to these guys looking, going, wow. You talking about funny? Herm is almost like, you kind of look at him and just, that's him, but he's really like him. And the sound bites and just, you go, I caught that.
So let's talk a little bit too about kind of the challenges that are being faced now. Because obviously not just with football. The big conversation is there going to be a football season, right? Everybody's like scrambling around that. And, first of all, what are your thoughts on kind of whether or not there will actually be a season? And if there is a season, what kind of challenges, obviously exist to make that happen?
Honestly, it's way too much over my pay grade to even think about. And this is something my wife and I talked about this morning. That it's unbelievable that it shut everything down. I've been through Katrina. I've been through, we saw Sandy in New York. I was live at 9/11, but this is like economics, political. It's not a bias. It is what it is, and it's a new normal. And I really don't know. I mean, who would have thought? 6 months ago, I walked to a grocery store. Now, would make sure I bring my own bags, sanitize my hands before I go on. When I go out, make sure I have a mask on. I mean, it's unique. And I'm thinking, even like when one of the things I oversee is strength and conditioning. I mean, you can only have 10 people in the weight room at one time. So I need shifts. How you walk them in, how you clean. So I've been in those conversations. The whole thing's going to be unique, and it's going to check out the resilience of our country. And I think sports has a way of making everybody feel like it's going to be all right. And I'm hoping that we get through this. I hope that basketball starts, baseball starts, but I want to get through it safely. I don't want the bounce back. I'm trying my best not to be too cynical.
Yeah.
I'm more optimist, but I'm also looking at the science, and
I think all of us just kind of have to take the news and information as it comes and make good decisions as information presents itself. Right.
Facts.
I also wanted to talk. We talked about Herm Edwards, but you guys also made a huge hire on the basketball side, right? With college basketball legend Bobby Hurley, and then I believe, trying to remember his name, you had a surprise Joshua Christopher. That's his name. Huge recruit land on the basketball side too. It seems like Arizona State as a program all around is on the upswing.
It's culture. It's culture. It's everything. Because the volleyball coach, Sonia Tomatovich, feels like Herm Edwards. Everybody. Sheila McInerney, who oversees women's tennis, she called me right now, picking up the phone. Sorry, fellas, I got to go.
Yeah.
And so Herm, obviously, football got to get buttered and bread. I mean, got to. And basketball has to. But Zeke Jones doesn't feel any different. Missy K. Farr, who is a two-time breast cancer survivor, our women's golf coach, and won national championships as a player, assistant coach, and as a head coach, she doesn't feel any different. Tracy Smith feels like this is based in MLBU. And so when you have a group of super friends like that and they all treated the same, they got a chance for an outstanding culture. And being in a culture, we're going to help them. I mean, that's just incredible. I mean, I was on a Zoom call the other day with like 25 football players. And my goal was to tell them I could help them when it comes to choosing an agent. I don't work in football directly, but I do have some football responsibilities, like we all do. I'm the assistant general manager in our football structure, so I have the strength and conditioning. Joe Conley was one of the best street coaches in the country. I have the equipment room. I oversee that. And so those are two things I do in football. And obviously I have some recruiting assignments. So, yeah, Bobby's big time, man. I mean, that doesn't surprise me. We got Lou Dort from Canada. I mean, as you know, Canada's been a hotbed for a while in basketball. So it's how we recruit. And if you're a basketball player, why wouldn't you want to come here? I mean, and that's the reason. And once they get here, they realize, you know what? 80 degrees outside November.
Right.
Yeah.
And then facilities mean a lot. I mean, our basketball facility can argue with most pro facilities. I mean, on the female and male side. I mean, so when you say I have these facilities, it's a big time conference in basketball. I mean, it's from California. So really California is, you know anything about Arizona State. When we're really good, California got enough athletes, man. We could split them up and be fine.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
Cali got it. You don't. In fact, if you at SC or UCLA, you don't have to get on the plane. You could just drive the Beltway.
Right. That's so true. And speaking of, kind of the culture, right? And you actually seen and are still involved with, to a certain degree, the Ohio State, right, on one side of the country, and then Arizona State on the other side of the country. What differences or similarities, I guess, have you seen between those two kind of programs?
They're just different. I mean, you talking about conferences, they're just totally different. I mean, I think that the Arizona player now, under our leadership, is probably one of the best positions ever if you're going to make it to the NFL or the NBA. I mean, it's just what it is because of what we have to coach. And then life skills. I don't know what everybody else has, but I know going to Ohio State, I didn't understand that we really had the best. I mean, and that people were watching.
Right.
But Arizona State too won a lot of Pac-10 titles, man. They got a lot of quality players in the Hall of Fame. Randall McDaniel, Eric Allen,
James Harden,
Mike Haynes, James Harden. I mean, it's just some outstanding players. And you don't even know they went to school here. It's like Curly Culp's in the Hall of Fame, and he won national championship wrestling. I mean, people don't even know they went to school here, and it's like, he went to school there, man. I mean, people don't know lefty played here. Mickelson.
Yeah.
Nicholson played it. John
Yeah.
Rahm played it. John Rahm was here a while ago. I mean, again, humble. I mean, John Rahm was like, when I tell you funny, I mean, he's a golfer and he's one of the best golfers in the world. Because I had men's golf when I first came in. I'm looking at this guy, and he's looking at me, and I'm like, is he good? And they're like, I'm like, okay. I didn't know if he was good or not. So,
Right.
oh, yeah, he's pretty good.
And
So,
also,
the difference is just that's the biggest difference. I mean, they have their, one thing I can tell you, though, they, like, I don't hate Michigan. I just like them.
mm-hmm.
They hate Arizona.
Oh,
No, they hate each other.
Really?
You know, that when I say hate, I don't like the word hate, but they hate each other because it's economics. Remember, it's in the same state.
Yeah.
Now, that was part of Ohio State and Michigan. They were fighting over the border.
Right.
But it never really got economic. I mean, they challenge up to, like, their weight room was, they built 10,000 feet. They go 10,001 feet. I mean, they just compete on, I mean, it's ridiculous. They got this thing called the Territorial Cup that you battle in all the sports, and whoever wins more sports on track and basketball, you get this cup. I mean, literally, like, this cup, and you keep it. And we have the cup for the last 2 years.
That actually
nasty.
brings me to an interest. I was going to ask you about this, but this is actually kind of a perfect segue to that, which is kind of the NCAA name, image, and likeness scenario that's changing. And the reason why I think what you just said kind of brought me to it is because the battles now in recruiting are going to be a little bit different, right? Because you're talking about essentially who can offer what at the end of the day, what program, what city. Not necessarily the program, but what city, what corporations and that are available. And the fact that you guys are in the same state with another big program could also present unique challenges in recruiting. How do you, first of all, do you agree that, players should be making money off of their name, image, and likeness? And then secondly, how do you feel like that thing is going to actually play out in recruiting?
One, I mean, they just working it out. I mean, everything you hear is half of what's actually out there. And two, I think it has to be something or some mechanism, and I'm not sure exactly how you do it. Again, that's above my pay grade, and I try not to comment on things that I really don't know about.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't studied it. I've read a light version of it. I haven't really read a heavy version because it's not going to affect me per se, but I am learning about branding and value and assets because I do understand that from my NFLPA days. So I try to update myself on those items, but I don't really look at those because, I mean, really right now, we're just trying to survive. So we strive later on. That's my motto, and that's our motto on the bar. We want to strive to survive. We want to survive, and we want to get through this thing without being with any calamity.
Right. Absolutely. So we're gonna actually I have one more question I want to ask you before we jump into something fun, and then we'll get you out of here. Looking at your bio, you are also a wrestler and a lacrosse player in high school. Is that true? If you didn't play football and you had to choose, I guess, one other sport or a career, what do you think you would have wanted to do?
I probably would have wrestled. I mean, I was probably my best. That was probably my, I don't know how much better football player I would have been, but wrestling, it would have been because just the athleticism.
Yeah.
I mean, wrestling, I would have been pretty good at that.
What weight class were you?
I wrestled heavyweight, even though we didn't have a 90-pounder. They got 90-pounders now, so it went from 77 to 220. And so I weighed like 192, and I'm like, I'm not losing no weight. I'm keeping my weight for football.
Right.
And because I wrestled throughout junior high school, but when my freshman year in high school, I was 112 pounds. My senior in high school, I was 192 pounds. So I was not losing any weight. And so my junior year in high school, my wrestling coach said, come out, wrestle what you weigh. I said, man, the dude's too big. He goes, they're not quick as you, they're not fast as you, they're not athletic. So just here's what we're going to do. I said, cool. So I did it, and it made me a lot tougher. If you look at some of the better football players, they were wrestlers. Luke Fickell, wrestler.
Yeah.
Ray Lewis, wrestler. Sullivan's wrestler. Rowdy White, wrestler. I mean, just, they got some, it just makes you a little tougher wrestling.
You think you would have taken your talents to the WWE?
No, I wasn't doing like K-shirts and all of that. Scott wasn't doing that. No, man. I had a problem with the singlet back then. Scott wasn't doing that. No.
Right. Hilarious. All right. One more. I just thought of one more question, and then we'll ask some last couple questions, and we'll get you out of here. Legacy. You seem like you don't talk about it, but the way you move shows me that you care kind of about two things. One is about how you impact people. Maybe just that. How you impact people. And so I guess my question to you is, what do you want your legacy to be when people ultimately write the story of Scottie Graham? What is it that you want people to say?
He cared about his family. He cared about people. He made a difference. He was faithful. And he was a Buckeye.
I love it. I love it. Succinct, to the point. And the reality is that those are the things that we do think about you. So that's the good news. You know, I'm gonna give you your flowers now while you're here, right? So you don't have to ever worry about whether or not that's what we think. That is definitely what we think. So you know, keep being you. And thanks for joining us, man. But we're gonna ask you some two fun questions, and we're gonna get you out of here. The first question is, tell us your top 5 musicians of all time.
Miles Davis, James Brown, Whitney Houston, John Coltrane, and Michael Jackson.
Legends
everywhere. I love it.
And also let's your top 5 athletes of all time.
MJ, John Randall. I played with the Vikings, a Hall of Famer. Jesse Owens. Jim Thorpe. And Sugar Ray Leonard.
Sugar Ray Leonard. I like it. I love it, man. And so you mentioned MJ, so I'm sure you've been tuned into Last Dance. I guess we'll get you out of here on that. What are some of your thoughts of just watching the Last Dance?
Confirming what you already know. I mean, you kind of hear these stories, and that's what makes MJ like a legend. Like you hear these stories, like you know how he did this, but then you understand, like, he's like, man, this is what I like doing. I like gambling. I mean, it was like, all right, well, you gamble. And you hear about the gamble story. So that was cool for him to, I mean, it's always good to say, you know, what you do. I mean, so that was really cool. And looking at his competitiveness, man, and how you hear about him and Kerr, and it's like, for him to Kerr to just grow, we grew through friction. I mean, diamonds grow through friction. And Mike was going to cause the friction. I mean, you hear, I mean, Mike was going to cause the rub. I mean, most great ones do, though. I mean, when I played for the Vikings, Chris Carter was in the huddle all day long. Scott, you better get this first down. I'm like, you better get this first down. All right, no problem. We're going to make this block. Now, you know, Moss can get Moss because you're making this block. So there was always going to be pressure, and the great ones always going to push you. They always going to.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, we've enjoyed it, and actually, we enjoyed this, man. Obviously, we could talk to you probably for hours and hours. We're inspired by you. We watch you. We follow you. We obviously root for you. And, we really appreciate you joining us on the Pilot Boys podcast.
We're going to have to make a trip out there and see you one of these days.
Yeah, man. You got to come out and visit Herm, man. I mean, you need to come out like towards the end of football so you can come to basketball, holler at Bobby, too. I mean, you guys will bug the community we got here.
Yeah, no, we'll definitely do that, man. So, obviously stay safe, have you and your family.
Likewise.
Keep us posted. We'll be in communication for sure. And again, thanks for joining us, man. We appreciate it.
Love the Pilot Boys podcast? Support us on Patreon. Supporters can pledge as little as $1, and we have some cool perks on there. Check out www.patreon.com/Pilot Boys podcast. Show us some love today.
You're listening to the Pilot Boys podcast, episode 29. Time to hit some news and notes, V. What's up?
Let's get it.
So let's start with Notre Dame. Notre Dame is, just announced essentially that they're going to be coming back to school this fall. It's not a tentative announcement. It is the announcement. They're going to start actually early, 2 weeks earlier than they normally would, which is August 10th. I think they're not going to have a winter break, and they're going to end early, like in late, or like before Thanksgiving. And I think the reason that they're doing it that way is in case there is like another wave of this thing that comes in the winter, they would have a lot of their kids off campus by then. What are your thoughts on kind of that decision? Particularly it's May. I understand you got to make those decisions a little early, but what do you think about that decision?
Well, I mean, I think that they obviously went through an evaluation process with this thing, and there are a lot of things to consider here. Obviously, number one, first and foremost, is it safe is important, right? And then the question is it safe enough seems to be the more pertinent question now, especially when we start thinking about just how our economy runs and the fact that there are other variables to consider here too. I think we've had several conversations too over the last week of the impact that taking people's normal routine away from them that they've gotten used to for years and years, how that impacts people psychologically, right?
Yeah.
Like now, college kids being at home for months that they weren't supposed to be at home, younger kids at home, parents having to educate them. There are just so many different dynamics that we need to consider when we evaluate this thing, right? Beyond if they do feel like it's reasonably safe, I do think things like schools should be opening up. Now, when we get to other things that aren't nearly as important or critical, like opening up bars, I think we're having a different discussion at that point, right?
Yeah, and then obviously, I should have said this, but I think this comes without having to say really, is that they're going to be opening up with strict social distancing measures. They're going to have testing. They're going to be doing temperature checks and different various things, right? So it's not like they're just opening up and acting as if everything is normal. They're going to be opening up with restrictions. And I agree with your point. I think, at a certain point, the analysis becomes, and this is kind of, I think it's great for people to think globally or, even beyond just, not even all the way globally, even regionally, but I think a lot of people are just thinking locally. And a lot of times you look at the data locally and you say, okay, what is the data locally, right? What's happening in New York per se is not necessarily what's going to happen in Indiana, so that's important. And then eventually the question is going to become, what is the risk? You're going to do your risk assessment and you're going to say, what's the cost benefit, right? And because there's a risk to everything, like you said, there are both sides of this thing, and there's injury, so to speak, on both sides. And eventually you're just going to make a risk analysis and decide. So I think that in a way, I like that they've decided early, because I believe that they also know that they have a responsibility to open up safely, and that gives them more time to really figure out what does that mean, right? So we'll see what happens. But I think the segue from that obviously is, what does that now mean for college football? Again, I understand that's just one university, but even, Gordon Gee of West Virginia came out and said he expects to play. I mean, a lot of people expect to play. What could college football look like? I posted some thoughts on it on Twitter, but what are your thoughts on it?
Well, I mean, where I always circle back to is that, is it safe, right? And are people making these decisions based on bias, or are they being objective, right? And I think there's obviously a clear bias when it comes to universities, especially Division I programs. The financial value of football is so high that you just wonder if their goal is to figure out a way to make it work versus let's make sure everything is kosher before we make sure we make it work. Like, how are they approaching this thing, right? Are they approaching it from the process of we're just going to do anything that we have to do to be able to open up and play college football, or are they actually being responsible and cautious in their approach?
Well, I think the thing is that what makes this unique is that there isn't and cannot really be a universal standard for each member institution, so to speak, right? Because everybody is dealing with different issues based on, their location, obviously, what's happening actually in that city and state, how much travel or, international or even, national travel do they have, or do their students have to do? What are your classrooms going to look like, right? Because assuming if there's football, there's going to be school. What are your classrooms going to look like? And then what does your testing have to look like? What's your testing capabilities? And so, there are a lot of different things. So to come up with a uniform idea.
Even housing, right? Universities are responsible for housing many students, right? How do you make sure that environment is safe? And so before we even get to college football, if they are going to open up universities, there's a larger responsibility here that they need to consider. And football and sports and athletics obviously is important on that spectrum, but it's probably further down the list. Wouldn't you agree? Should be further down the list than a lot of other things.
it probably is further down the list, but I guess it depends on who you're talking to and what you're talking about. And that's the thing that makes this thing kind of complex, right? Because, if there is no football, right, what does that do for the psyche of people? Whether we agree it should be that way or not, right? There are a lot of people that are not going to be able to deal with that well. What consequences does that bring?
I've been half jokingly saying we might be headed to a civil war if we don't have football in the fall.
Well, especially you joke around about that, and I understand, but there's also some truth to that that's actually scary because of how politicized this thing has turned into. It's almost like if you believe one thing, then you're on this side of the aisle, and if you believe another thing, you're on this side of the aisle, and it literally has turned into people hating each other. I mean, the bickering online and the stuff that you're seeing, the protests, people are really charged up about this, and if that does happen, that football gets shut down again. A lot of people will consider that a political decision, and that's all it takes, to stoke some fires.
It's interesting because it's like there's that saying that reasonable people can disagree, but what happens? What we're seeing a lot is a lot of unreasonable people having discussions about major issues that move our country. And nobody's being reasonable, and no one's being logical in their approach.
Well, the other thing too is that I think it's almost impossible to ask someone to make this analysis devoid of their personal situation, right? Yeah. I don't care how educated you think you are, or whatever. A lot of times you're going to be affected by it. If you're a single parent at home with 5 kids running around, your thoughts on this might be are going to be different than some millionaire who has, no kids sitting up in the valley in LA. You know what I mean? So that's the other thing too, but we'll see. And along those lines, as far as college coaches across the country, including at Ohio State, have returned, or at least started returning to campus in a limited fashion. So, I think that people are starting to gear up for the possibility, right? And you have to be ready for whatever. Nobody's going to give you any slack or, give you, there's no asterisk next to next year's national championship. It's were you ready or were you not? So I think that puts a lot of pressure on the coaches as well. Yeah. And the student athletes.
Yeah. They're opening up, right? And they've got to go back to work. Everyone's kind of got to figure out a way to go back to work. It's good that they're doing it slowly. And we're not just opening up, but the concern always is can we leave people to do things responsibly when they have this much freedom to do whatever they want, right? Without rules and guidelines in place. That's the concern.
So we'll see. And this is just part of our society now. So I think everybody from your local daycare to your local grocery store is going to have to just make decisions, and you hope that everybody, the constituents, make smart decisions, and we'll see where we are. This thing is not. Eventually, we will know where we are. So, let's talk some music though, real quick. Tekashi 6ix9ine. There's discussion online whether he should ever be talked about, right? And some people say that he shouldn't, and people have those discussions. But the reason why I bring him up now is not even really so much about him, but about something that he pointed out. He criticized Billboard this week. Essentially saying that people can buy their way to the number 1 spot. And this is after his new song, I think, debuted at number 3. And he basically said that people are buying their way, like Ariana Grande and Justin Bieber fired back saying they didn't buy their way. But, there are accusations, not just from him. We've been hearing this since way before Billboard. Are people buying their way into these number 1 spots? Somebody said one of these artists has like 4 or 5 different credit card accounts. Or 10 or 40 different credit card accounts, that they use to buy stuff with. And, Billboard is taking into account a lot of other stuff now. What are your thoughts about like this whole thing? Not necessarily Tekashi per se, but just kind of the accusation and the state of the Billboard.
I mean, Tekashi's case is a classic situation of the message getting lost in the messenger, right? Mm-hmm. No one really has any sympathy for his situation or what's going on, but anyone who's spent any time in the record industry knows how much manipulation and behind the scenes shit happens, especially when it comes to ratings and Billboard records and all that stuff. It's a tale as old as time, and it's not unique to the music industry. It's also happens across any industry where things are measured like this, right? Yep. And There's a difference between being number one on the Billboard chart and number 5, especially when you're talking about a record with Ariana Grande and Justin Bieber. When you factor in the cost that probably went behind even making a record like that happen with these two big stars, the reputational damage, the financial damage that could occur if they don't get the results that are needed, incentivizes things to happen like this. So I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, I think you make a great point, and it's almost the point that I like to make a lot of times, which is that almost nothing that we're hearing here is isolated to this industry, right? This is how business works. When there's a lot of money involved, a lot of money at stake, and big financial players at stake, and you have the opportunity to do things. It's kind of like steroids in baseball. People are manipulating behind the scenes, and then what starts to happen and is that you start getting faced with the dilemma. And this happens to politicians sometimes too. You come in with, so quote unquote pure intentions. And all of a sudden you say, wait, everybody that I'm fighting against is not fighting fair. Yeah. They're all doing this same thing. And there's actually no way that I can legitimately compete with that. What do I do? Now you're faced with a moral dilemma. You say, do I just work harder, running like a hamster on a wheel? Or do I join the game, and figure out and maybe be smarter about it or whatever? And the other problem is that Billboard is including so many different things now with merch and things. It's just hard to keep up with every single thing. And it's hard to create rules for every single thing. But you got to believe, again, whether or not, about this happened to Tekashi or not, you got to believe that type of manipulation is for sure happening.
And, Tekashi, again, he's the master of knowing how to drive attention to himself and be a troll, right? He's a professional, the highest level troller in the world, probably, at least in the entertainment industry. This wasn't about whether it was 3. Him in his position as pretty much an independent artist to come out of jail and have a number 3 hit is a huge deal, and he's happy about it. But he's just creating controversy because that's
that's what he trades off of, right? Is attention, right? He doesn't. The music is part of it, so to speak, but it's way more than that for him. So if this becomes the fact that we're even talking about this, there are people talking about this all across the country. There are articles. They say Billboard removed him from their site altogether. It's a whole thing, and all that does is just drive attention to whatever song that he's complaining wasn't number 1, and you guarantee the streams are going to go up. So from that perspective, it's genius, and it's just typical Tekashi, like you said. Yeah. So we'll see. Let's move on. Let's talk about the Last Dance finale. We've been talking about this for the last 5 weeks now, and obviously, we were sad that the 9 and 10 came, and we probably could watch, 10 more, 30 more episodes of this thing. But I think that, first of all, my question to you is, how well do you think it was done from actual directorial and production standpoint? And then the second question is, what were your thoughts on the finale?
I mean, I think it was very well done. Obviously, it wasn't perfect.
What issues did you have with it, or what could have made it perfect?
Well, I didn't necessarily. I mean, I understood why they did it, but I think they could have been a little bit smoother in going back and forth on the timelines. That was one thing, but it's hard. You're trying to tell the story of that season while telling his entire career,
the ultimate story.
So it's not a major gripe; it's a small gripe. And then I think the other thing is that you could tell that Jordan being involved in, it's kind of like the difference between an autobiography and a biography, right?
Yeah.
The fact that Jordan kind of was so involved in this.
He drove the narrative. He drove every narrative.
He drove the entire narrative here. And I think it would have been good. I know he had control over this thing, for it to be a little bit more kind of objective.
Let me speak on that point real quick too, because they said essentially that he wasn't. I mean, and this, if you just watching him, you could tell this is probably true. If he wasn't going to be pretty much involved this way, then he wasn't going to do it, and they knew that they had to get him like this, or else he wasn't going to do it. Because there are other stories. First of all, this isn't about whether Jordan's the GOAT or anything like that. Whatever, but there are other stories that, like you said, I wish could have been more objective. Like the Gary Payton story, Gary Payton was a real threat You can try to shrug Gary Payton off and act like, I mean, he wasn't. Obviously, he's not going to stop him.
He was more of a threat than other people, but he wasn't a real threat.
Well, I'm just saying he was a threat.
He did the best job of any player ever.
He was a threat
he's
a threat to the extent point that he can hold you to 22 points or 24 points a game, and you're not going to go for 45. That's the problem with Jordan. It's not about whether or not he can. The way you beat Jordan is him not going for 45 and going for 50, and pretty much Gary Payton being on him. That wasn't going to happen, and so I'm just using it as an example. Him kind of dismissing that. I would have liked to get a little bit deeper into that.
I think the thing is the overall thing here is though with Jordan, right? Like now we're so used to stars and public figures like being so open and us knowing everything about them. Them stating their opinions on every single thing. I think Jordan is a fairly private person, but I do buy like his story that he wanted. I think he really did want to win the finals on Father's Day. That's the type of person he is. Like he calculates these type of things.
Absolutely.
But with that said, it doesn't discount the fact that Gary Payton did a phenomenal job guarding the greatest player of all time.
Yeah, and that series would have been different. We're not saying you wouldn't have won, but he got to. I guess what I'm saying is he got to drive certain narratives. He got to drive the Isaiah.
Yeah, he
narrative.
did. He definitely did.
He had to drive whatever, and even Scott Burrell, the way they made him look, I'm not really sure what the purpose of that was. But it was just kind of like
it was kind of to show that he was. I think they were trying to show that he was a dickhead, right?
He was a dick, yeah. But it was almost like he was just. It didn't feel necessary, and I would have liked to hear from Pippen more. I would like to hear from Horace Grant more, right? And then there's rumors that Luke Longley and Jordan have serious beef, and Luke Longley refused to even be a part of it, and I guess the beef dates back to whatever. But what did you think about the finale? Take all that stuff out, and what did you think about some of the themes of the finale, and kind of the fact that this thing has come to an end now?
Well, one thing that we discuss a lot, right, is, and I've discussed this with many athletes, and I'm sure you have as well. I had a conversation with a player back in the day named Drew Gooden, right? And he was like, in a lot of ways, he said that he envied my position as an entrepreneur because he was still an employee, regardless of the fact that he was making millions of dollars. He was still an employee. And that's one of my takeaways here toward the end, and them breaking up the Bulls, right? No matter how great Jordan was as a cultural icon, the most popular athlete in the world, because he was an employee of an organization, he didn't get his way, right? Like he didn't want that team to be broken up. And it's just kind of a reminder again of when people say, oh yeah, these guys are millionaires. They shouldn't complain about anything, or they shouldn't have any gripes with anything. He had no control over a decision that shouldn't have been made, right? Like Jerry Krause telling Phil Jackson, I don't care if you go 82-0, we're not coming back. Like to not have that power as even the most powerful athlete in the world is something that stood out to me. And then the second thing was just Jordan is kind of a study in a maniac, right? Like he is a maniac.
And if you so that's the thing. I think a couple things. One funny thing, or not funny, but was the flu game was not the flu game. It was the food poisoning game. And the way they told that story was like, are they saying that they poisoned him? That they brought five guys came and they were looking in, and the trainer said, "Oh, I don't have a good feeling about this." What do you mean you don't have a good feeling about this? Like, I wish they would have elaborated on that, And then
how could Jordan they know? Did they order the pizza under Michael Jordan's name? Like,
who knows? People probably figured out where he is. And
they knew it was the Bulls team hotel.
They knew where they stayed, and
it was the Bulls.
So I wish they would have elaborated on that story. I think one thing that stood out to me about this, and I guess just throughout the whole series, is like you said, the way he was back then is the way he is now. Even when he's talking about a story or anything, or reading something or hearing something that someone said, he's so dismissive. He thinks improved this, by the way, that he's just far and away above anything. He doesn't. you're like, yeah, they gave us trouble, but no big deal. You know what I mean? Like, but the reason why he's like that, or the fact that he's like that, is kind of what drove him, right? Because I think deep down he really did give other people respect, but he forced himself to elevate to a level that where he just was not going to lose, no matter what the circumstances were. The other thing that, one other thing, real quick, that about that episode too was the Scottie thing. Scottie getting hurt in Game 6 against the Jazz, and almost not being able to play. It's amazing that they got through that, because who knows what happens. They lose that game and it goes to Game 7. History might have been written a lot differently.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point to what I was going to talk about. And they talked about this in the documentary, about how Jordan was always present in the moment. He fully was able to analyze a situation and a circumstance, calculate and determine what he needed to do in those situations. Right. In the back, there's no way Jordan didn't know, oh shit, Scottie's injured. We don't want this shit to go to a Game 7. Right. He actually did that calculation. And then to actually do that calculation and basically take the team on his back, and say, you know what, Scottie, I got this. Scottie going to him and telling him, look, I'm not good.
Fucked up. Right.
Fucked up right now. And that also goes to show you, like, when we talk about this team compared to other teams, the chemistry and camaraderie and relationships, whether all his teammates liked him or not, or they liked each other or not, the fact that this team stayed together so long, they understood each other intuitively. And I think that's a big part of why they were able to maintain greatness that we haven't seen since, right? You see, the other thing that I think, and you and I talked about this before, but I want to make sure I mention this again. It is almost impossible to have a star the caliber of Scottie Pippen who would continue to play that role for a decade. It wouldn't happen. Just look at all the situations. What happened in OKC with Russell and Harden. Look at KD. He can't. No one's trying to be these. That's why those type of guys like Klay Thompson is kind of like that, like Scottie. Those type of guys are rare, and without them, because it's not just the talent, it's also the demeanor, the acceptance of, and not just what's happening on the basketball court. You're talking about, you're a top 50 grade player, but people aren't running up to, they're pushing you out of the way to get to Mike. For a decade. Not to mention you're underpaid. Not to mention, you're not getting the same level of endorsements probably in that city because Mike is getting them. So I just want to really he maintained that small town Central Arkansas kid, and I think he had a deep appreciation for how much Jordan and Phil helped him become a great player, right? And I think
100%.
That's something that a lot of people don't have, especially great, alpha males don't have the ability to do, right? It's always about, I made myself. I did this.
I think you mentioned it. I think you mentioned it too. Was he? I think in a lot of ways he was just grateful, right? Because like how he even became a basketball star. Didn't start off on the team in high school and then grew and then ended up Central Arkansas. It wasn't like he was a guy that went to UCLA or Duke or Ohio State or something like that and then ended up in the league. So I think he was just grateful throughout the process. Yeah, and that's the other thing is like if he had that same talent, but he was a star guy and came from UCLA, who knows what would have happened, And so obviously Dennis Rodman needs to be mentioned, Paxton Kerr, a lot of the teammates. But that was the other thing I was going to say was that everybody's role was so clearly defined. I mean, Steve Kerr knew he was going to get 5 shots, 7 shots a game. So did Paxton. They knew exactly what their role was. And they were just literally.
Kukoc led the second team when the guys needed their rest.
It was a perfectly constructed team mentally.
And the thing is, everyone had egos, but everyone checked their egos, right?
Yeah. And Phil has to get a ton of credit. Even if you just read between the lines and some of the stuff Mike said, Phil knew how to get me basically to control me. Phil's the only person that knew how to control me. If I was getting out of control, he would kick me out of practice. He knew how to control the mood. He knew how to control the settings. He knew when to include me in certain decisions. He really understood how to can get me to be a better teammate. Without Phil, I mean, obviously Michael Jordan is still Michael Jordan in a certain way, but without Phil navigating that and constructing that, being the captain of that ship for as long as he was, who knows what would have happened with the Bulls.
That's the reason he has 11 rings, right?
Right.
Because he did it again with Kobe and Shaq and kept them under control. But, one of my favorite moments in it was when Steve Kerr told the story about when Jordan told him he was gonna pass him the ball, right? And Jordan was like whispering it, and it just goes to show you how much these guys respected him as a basketball player. Steve Kerr was just so excited.
I'll be ready, Mike.
That Michael Jordan was willing to count on him in a big moment, and it shows that even if you didn't like the guy, that's why he was probably a great teammate, is because people respected him, and he made sure to bring the best out of his teammates as well.
Well, I think last thing I'll say on this too, and not to just have a gush fest, but I think one other thing about Jordan that gets left behind a lot of times was his basketball IQ, right? And so, I mean, I guess that probably goes without saying. If you're one of the greatest players, you have a high basketball IQ. But a lot of times when you hear arguments about, Michael Jordan or discussions on Michael Jordan, you don't necessarily hear that part of it. You hear it about LeBron, but you don't necessarily hear it from Mike. And so I mentioned that because of what you just said about that play with Kerr. That was because he knew what was coming. Yeah, he studied the game. He studied the teams. He knew what their tendencies were.
Even
he remembered their sequences.
Steal, right?
Yep, that too, exactly. So the Karl Malone steal, he knew that Karl wasn't going to be paying attention on the Kerr play. He knew that he was going to get double teamed and that Kerr was going to be open. I mean, so that's part of what makes people great basketball players as well. So I'm obviously sad that it's over, just because I think it was a great thing for us to watch during this quarantine. Obviously, it brought back a lot of childhood memories. It was entertaining. And but the good thing is that I think this period of time has inspired a lot of other things to happen. I think we're going to, start getting a lot of good content because people realize that, this is a good opportunity to capitalize.
I think the greatest takeaway, and this is my final thought on it from the documentary, is that Jordan has an incredible amount of self-awareness. And I think that that's kind of the takeaway from all of us. Understand who you are and be comfortable in being yourself, right? Like, that's the number one thing that about him, outside of obviously his basketball talent, is that he knew who he was and he didn't give a shit what anyone else thought, really. And that's what drove him. Like, even people saying he's an asshole, you hear the stories about, no, he's not an asshole to everyone. He just doesn't want to be friends with everyone. And there's, there's different elements of him that I think there are likable characteristics. There are obviously characteristics you wish he didn't have. But at the end of the day, all of those things made him who he is. And you just evaluate it how you want to evaluate it.
Right. Speaking of a great guy, a great athlete named Mike Tyson, man, you posted something on Pilot Boy social media about a potential fight between Mike Tyson and Evander Holyfield. I don't think it's confirmed yet, but there's obviously rumors that there's negotiations, and it's getting a ton of reaction. I mean, a ton of reaction from a lot of people. What are your thoughts on the potential of that happening and what the type of outcome would be?
I think it shows you the pent-up demand, the people who, how spoiled we were for a long period of time in the heavyweight division, right? You had Tyson, then Holyfield, then Lennox Lewis, and Riddick Bowe, and all these guys in the
and before that, Foreman and Frazier and Ali, and
And so you realize that people really in that era, and specifically Mike, right? How big of a cultural phenomenon he is, right? In terms of
still
beyond the people who are casual boxing fans will tune in for Mike Tyson because they know who he is, and just how dominant he was. It was just, he moves the needle.
So what do you think about? So what do you think about people who are saying? I mean, obviously, I want to get your opinion on the Tyson Evander thing too. But what do you think about people who think that Tyson could legitimately compete with the heavyweights now? I mean, is it, first of all, we saw Tyson in probably better shape and more of his prime and younger get dominated by heavyweights who are probably worse than some of these guys, right? Especially towards the end. But when you see the video of him training, you start to get reminded of who he was and what he could do. Is it realistic at 53 that he could really compete with some of these the top heavyweights now, or are we just kind of dreaming a little bit?
Well, Tyson still can knock you out with one punch, right?
You think so?
Any given punch, yeah. I think he has that type of knockout power, but I think when you fully evaluate kind of why Tyson didn't survive and last, obviously there was the out of the ring, not off the field, out of the ring issues that everyone has talked about ad nauseum. But it was also, he was at one of the things about Tyson that people don't understand in the heavyweight division from a strictly size and reach standpoint, he was an underdog in every fight, right? He's like 5'8". Most heavyweights are over 6 feet tall. And the amount of energy he needs to expend to even reach up and throw punches at guys who often were 6'3", 6'4", there's a stamina issue, right? And that's why the tale on Tyson was if you could get through 5 or 6 rounds, he would tire out. But people didn't understand it wasn't necessarily because he didn't train hard or any of that. It was literally he was expending more energy to fight because he had a legitimate size disadvantage. So now at 53, I don't know if he can make it past. If he couldn't do
Tyson
it,
and Fury are both like 6'6", right? Tyson and Fury, and Wilder.
Yeah, they're huge.
They're both like
guys.
6'6". Yeah.
Yeah, and Lennox Lewis is 6'5". Even Holyfield's he's shorter too, but he's 6 feet. So that's the issue, that challenge you face. Do I think that he could give you 3 good rounds? Yeah, but Tyson can't go 12 rounds at 53 years of age.
Yeah, 53 is
fighting style.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll see what happens with that. I'm interested to see what happens. You asked if people would watch it on pay-per-view. A lot of people said yes. Some people said no, but a lot of people said that they would.
I'm more worried about Holyfield, right? Holyfield looks like and sounds like he already fought too long. Tyson's career, even though he ended, even if it wasn't on his terms, he went out early. Holyfield tried to let this thing go on because of his financial issues. I'm just worried about it. Maybe if he seems to be about this thing being a charity match, 5 rounds, 1 minute each.
Right.
If it's something like that, that's good. But
then it'll be fine. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm worried if it's anything more than that.
Right. So we'll see what happens with that. Let's do one more thing before we do some final thoughts. 112 and Jagged Edge potentially are in conversation to do a versus battle. And then DMX and Eminem is another one that I've been hearing rumors about. I don't know if either one of those are true. If so, what do you think about either one of those battles or both?
It's funny, when we were watching the show, I mentioned and I said Jagged Edge 112, right? Because I think if you were in that era, like as far as groups were concerned, like they're a perfect pairing, right? They are a perfect pairing. They were.
It's like Jodeci and Drew Hill.
That would have to be it too, but I don't think and I don't think anyone can match up with Jodeci, but Drew Hill would have been the best matchup.
Drew Hill would have been close, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean that one makes a lot of sense. I think DMX and Eminem would be a great one as well. I wanted to,
I think DMX has more hits than Eminem. But if you include features, then now you're battling. But if you're just talking about straight hits, like solo hits, I think DMX has more.
Well, I think it comes back. I think it will be an epic battle, right? Because Eminem has mixtape records from the G Unit days. Like you said, once you add in feature verses, because
if you add in features,
one verse a record,
right?
I think first of all, it's a great matchup because I think those two guys probably have a ton of respect for each other too,
for sure.
But and you also saw that right in last week's battle, like. People wanted to evaluate the Nelly and Ludacris thing. Ludacris has more hit records, right? And more standout verses than Nelly. But Nelly has bigger commercial and global hits.
Right.
And if you look at that, I think you could tell that Ludacris was actually better prepared for how a versus battle works, because Nelly was playing songs none of us had
That
even heard
people
before.
didn't know. Yeah.
It's not about what you're, I understand throwing in a Biggie song because Biggie's on it.
Right.
You got to go with songs. When you're battling, you got to go with songs that people
like
know.
Country Grammar. Did he even play Country Grammar?
He didn't play Country Grammar. He didn't play the record with Tim McGraw.
Yeah.
He left a lot of stuff. Even that last record when they were about to go out.
I was like, what is this? Why?
What are you doing?
I thought it was going to be Country Grammar for sure.
And then do the sound check. I think Swizz Beatz was talking about it afterwards. Like,
you got to do a sound check.
Send a kid out. You could tell that Ludacris did the sound check, made sure everything was kosher.
Ludacris was way prepared. He had outfit changes. He had all kinds of stuff. I mean, And again, I love Luda. I think, even, as I was coming up, he was a huge influence on me and even my rapping style. I have certain songs that probably sound more like Luda because of Luda, and he's just so unbelievably talented. I'm just happy that he continues to get this type of platform because I think he deserves it in abundance.
You can't even name one song that he got on that he didn't kill or murder.
No.
You can't. And you could tell the approach that he took to that battle is the approach he took to his career. Every time someone asked him to do a feature, he knew what that meant. And he took it seriously. And that's why he's one of the greats of all time. And that's why he's done so many great things out of the booth as well. Right.
For sure. So we'll look forward to these versus
credit
battles.
To Nelly. Nelly is obviously great too.
And Nelly did. Nelly was an influence too. Nelly did his thing. Yeah, he didn't. He wasn't prepared, but that battle was that battle was epic. At the end of the day. I mean, I enjoyed
energy
it thoroughly.
Nelly's energy and both of their mutual energy, where you could tell was genuine love, was great because Nelly kept that thing going.
One last thing, and then just some final outro stuff. Belmont Stakes, they plan to run on June 20th. That's actually the first leg of the Triple Crown. They're going to do that without fans. So, people are going to try to get back to it.
I don't see any issue with that one, right? Unless there's a danger to horses getting coronavirus or exposed to coronavirus in the jockeys. I think that's understandable. And the truth is, when you really understand this, is the economy needs and the sports betting community needs stuff to bet on.
They need action. And the last thing for news and notes is rest in peace to Annie Glenn, the wife of John Glenn, who was, but she was obviously a big name in her own right. She died actually at 100. Life goals, man. You make it all the way to 100. That type of life and that type of impact, it's great. So RIP to her. That's all we have for news and notes. You're listening to the Pilot Boys podcast. Shout out to Premier Podcast for getting us set up with our podcast during this quarantine period. Make sure you guys check them out for all of your podcast needs at premierpodcast.com. And make sure you check them out on social media at Premier Podcast. That's all we have for today's show. Big thanks to our guest, Scottie Graham. Thanks to everybody for listening. Don't forget, sharing is caring. Subscribe to the Pilot Boys podcast on Apple, Spotify, Patreon, and YouTube. And please follow us on social media at Pilot Boys Pod on Twitter and at Pilot Boys Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. And follow the host on Twitter. I am at Mechadon Music and V is at Viswant. Also, don't forget to grab some Pilot Boys wristbands at shop.pilotboys.com.
Always remember, be you. You is fly.
Pilot Boys out.
Pilot